5.
You're with John Perlman
on 702.
Let's look then at a story not so much breaking today, but definitely an undercurrent of considerable importance in South Africa's economy, with a diplomatic aspect to it as well. I'm referring to the tariffs that we are expecting to be imposed by the United States already. Our motor industry is facing real difficulties. Exports of our South African assembled vehicles to the United States down, as I understand it, by more than 80% over the first half of the year. We have spoken before about the actual auto industry, i.e. the assembly of the vehicles. But allied to that is another crucial part of the South African economy, and that is the businesses that actually manufacture automotive components and the businesses allied to that in turn. So what's happening there? Let's get an update and an insight from our next guest. Renai Moothilal is the CEO of the National Association of Automotive Component and Allied Manufacturers, to be referred to as NAACAM, if I can, going forward in the interview. Mr. Moothilal, very good afternoon to you and welcome. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. And yeah, definitely the mouthful up front. You definitely should go with NAACAM.
NAACAM, here we go.
Yes.
How many people employed in components at the moment?
Yeah, look at probably close on about 85,000.
Wow.
So it is by far the more employment-rich part of the autos manufacturing sector. And I think, like you said, really important in terms of the country's industrial makeup.
Yep. No, please finish.
I was going to say, I mean, in terms of the topic that you're talking about, definitely a sector that has long been, I suppose to some extent, beneficiary of the U.S. market, but also a complementary part of that market.
One of the things that I would assume, and I may be wrong, is that in the mix of companies that create those 85,000 jobs would be companies of very varying sizes. And if that is indeed the case, I would assume that their fighting fund to deal with a period of uncertainty or difficulty would be way less than what would be available to a car manufacturer itself. Am I right in assuming that vulnerability?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where the role of an organization like myself and then key departments such as the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. Interestingly, you also would rely on the voice of labor in this particular discussion.
Right.
But ultimately, it's a value chain. The OEMs themselves are impacted if you lose competitiveness of component manufacturers. So it's a very kind of integrated discussion.
Does the location of the components of your members pretty much match the footprint of the auto industry? So my mind goes Durban, Kariega, 𝗂𝗵𝗴𝗵𝗵, Buffalo City, and Rosslyn. I mean, is that pretty much where all your guys are?
I think a fair assumption, but they are actually wider spread than just those immediate hubs. Interestingly, there's a fairly significant portion of typically exporters in the Western Cape.
Okay.
And then other small pockets of production outside of those big metros that you mentioned.
So is there a light possibly at the end of the tunnel? I don't know how bright it would be, that your members don't just serve the South African auto assembly industry, that you might be producing components for example, a BMW factory in Germany?
Yeah, I mean, the South African component sector is really diversified. Of course, as you said, majority of them supplying to the domestic OEM plants, but a fair number already exporting. And the U.S. has been a large market for export, not only of vehicles, but components over the last 20 years. A really interesting point, and I think as negotiations happen behind the scenes, is the component sector is actually one of those with a surplus of components coming in from the U.S. And
okay.
That's a really important point as the negotiations go on.
Yeah, and just overall, I mean, as we move to the end of the interview, Mr. Moothilal, I mean, you have to be positive because the alternative is grim. But I mean, do you have plans in place? This has been looming for a while. Certainly, even before the tariff conversation began, there was the AGOA conversation. Have you got some strategies? And if you have, what can you share with us?
So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the interesting thing, one, is that immediately components are probably less impacted than finished vehicles because, as you can imagine, components going into U.S. Production plants are safety critical. So you can't just switch on and switch off component production. There's a period in which if the U.S. was to pick up what's being exported there, that transition needs to happen. So immediately, I think there's still work going on to try and secure that market. Having said that, there's definitely a lot of opportunities for diversification. And if you think about production in terms of new energy vehicles and the wider African discussion around material advantages, trying to increase penetration into markets of those particular technology, I think there's already a lot of work happening to try and reposition South Africa for some of those export opportunities.
Thanks so much. Renai Moothilal is CEO of NAACAM. They are involved, their members are involved in the automotive component and allied business. That